following is something that I did on the spot, pretty much, and I just edited out like where I was just like stuttering and like saying and crap like that. But it's an intro to what I would imagine would be like a top-notch Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I would see Freddy being played by either Kevin Bacon or Elijah Wood. And I actually wouldn't mind Elijah Wood directing either. He's even shown interest in doing it himself. But without further ado, here you go. What I would imagine the first 15 minutes of a Nightmare on Elm Street movie to be. Okay, just imagine this as like a faux screenplay for a Nightmare on Elm Street remake, but just done really well. Camera opens up on a Springwood town. Families are walking, father and daughter getting ice cream, everyone having a good time. Kids playing jump rope in the distance over on a grassy knoll, muttering something indistinctly. Camera focuses on a man working at an ATM. A man, and also a father, checks his watch, furiously. The technician finally finishes up with the ATM. The man uses the ATM and withdraws cash. Angrily, he rushes to his car, drives to an empty office with a computer and a desk. Scene flashes to writing something on his computer. Glasses halfway down his nose, angry look on his face. He jumps up, scared. Phone rings. He angrily picks it up. Lending and Accounts, Donald Thompson speaking. A woman screaming into the phone, his wife. "Marge?" he says. She screams into the phone, "Get home now." Hangs up. Donald slams down the receiver, throws on his jacket. He tries to call Marge once more. The phone rings. She doesn't pick up. He runs to his car and rushes home. Setting of home front facing street. Slow motion. Donald rips open car door, runs around the front to the front of the house. Up the steps, cop cars, lights, flashing all over the windows. Donald rushes inside, and inside he's met by a police officer. Donald's yelling, "What's going on?" Police try to comfort him. Quick flash to a boiler with fire raging. Flashback to the house. Donald. "Where's Marge?" Police officer. "Okay, Mr. Thompson. Everyone is okay. Your wife is pulling your daughter out of school right now. She reported a prowler about an hour and a half ago. Attempted break-in. She fended him off. We have an armed escort." Police officer grabs his radio, calls the other detective. "Klein, what's your 20? Radio chatter. Then return with interference. "We're right out front, Sarge. We're walking in the door in a few seconds." Marge comes walking in the door, focus on her face. Turn over to Don, focus on his face. They embrace. Their daughter, Nancy, walks up and embraces as well and doesn't really understand what's going on. She's about 4 years old. Don looks at Marge and says, "Can you tell me what the F is going on now?" "You mean you haven't heard? At least 30 kids have gone missing from school. Nancy was okay. I got her out. They said it's because I called them immediately. He must have heard me on the phone. He ran away." "Who's he?" Don says. Focus on an old rusty boiler room. A man sitting at a workbench. Then focus on 33 kids sitting in a corner of a room on stools. Some standing, some laying down, some playing with toys. A man sitting at the workbench, Fred Krueger, sharpening a knife at his workbench, whistling, "Have you ever had a dream, talking like I did?" Music continues. Child says, "Mr. Krueger, when are we going to get our ice cream?" Fred turns, revealing his face in the light of the room. "You just rest. The ice cream man should be here pretty soon." Fastening a few rivets and tightening a few screws, Fred rises and turns toward the children with his arms outstretched. "I just want all of you to know how much I love you." He takes one step forward. "I've got a little surprise for you." Fades back to the house of the Thompsons. Nancy sitting in her room, coloring on a coloring book. Donald bursts into Nancy's door. She looks up, expressively worried. Donald, "Nancy, did you see the janitor today?" "Yeah, Daddy. He came into class when the teacher was on break." "What do you mean, on break?" Flashback over to the boiler room. Fred Krueger playing with a puppet in front of all 33 children. They're watching, some laughing, some very worried, some crying, not able to move out of fear. Fred Krueger singing, "What I do, it does. What I do, it does. Now why don't you try?" Front child who was laughing tries grabbing the marionette. Fred smacks his hand. "No!" The child recoils, scaredly. Fred Krueger says, "I want you to do what I tell you to do." The child says, "I want to go." Fred, with a worried look on his face, says, "Where would you go? Your mommies and daddies? The only reason you're here is because your mommies and daddies hate you." Kid in the back screams, "My mommy loves me." Another kid screams, "You're a bad man." The kids start going into an uproar. "I want to leave. We're not getting our ice cream." Meanwhile, Fred starts slipping on a glove, his hand covered in black and oil stains. Two kids branch off, go behind Freddy, and go toward the door. They pull on it, but it doesn't work. They turn back toward Freddy, slipping on a metal contraption on top of the glove. Slightly pulls up his left sleeve, revealing red and green stripes. He takes off his overcoat and throws it on the workbench. As the kids are screaming, Freddy starts acting like a composer and flailing his arms back and forth and says, "We're gonna play a little game." Flashes back to the Thompson house. Sergeant talking to Donald in the kitchen. Marge making a cup of coffee for the officer. He takes a sip. "Thanks, Marge." "Yeah." Don says, "Do you have any idea where he could be? We already did a sweep of the school. We didn't find anybody. We went head to toe." "Where the F would he be?" Donald screams. Marge cowers a little by the coffee maker. Donald notices, reaches out, and says, "Marge, I'm sorry. Come here." They embrace. Scene focuses in on Sergeant, who turns toward Donald, says, "Hey, Chief." Chief Thompson turns toward the sergeant. Sergeant says, "I don't have a good feeling about this." Donald, turning around, hand to his forehead, turning worriedly, rubbing the back on Marge. "Get every car that you can out there. Abandon buildings. Get a unit to check that school again, head to toe. He's out there somewhere." Turns back to the boiler room. Freddy's standing over the furnace, his hand gloved with finger blades, rubbing up against the metal of the furnace, making a screeching noise. Every kid in the room stops, looks worriedly, and then some huddle together, cower in fear. One kid by the door, wrenching at it, trying to break it open. Cuts back to cop cars, driving all over, searching feverishly throughout the city. One kid in the boiler room walks up to Freddy, tugs on his sleeve. "Mr. Krueger, are you going to let us go?" Freddy grabs his hat, turns toward the child, and snugs it on his head. "A very long time from now, everyone will forget today." Freddy lifts his gloved hand, smiling, with an evil look on his face. Cut to the alleyway outside of the boiler room. Muffled children screaming, slashing noises, banging on doors and walls and windows. A chair breaking glass. Moments later, a nearby store owner hears breaking glass, walks outside of her shop and calls the police. Hearing children screaming, hand over her mouth. Thompson house. Phone ringing, Donald grabs it instantly. "We found him, Dom." Donald running outside of his house to his car, putting on a small siren on top of his roof, and then wrenching his car around at full speed, 180, and drives toward the destination. Officers, lights, darkness. A woman crying outside of the alleyway that called the police. An open doorway in an alleyway. Dark room. Chief Thompson walks inside. Stands for a moment staring, soaking in the breadth and gravity of the room. Brief flashes of a room completely red. Fire bubbling red. With blood. We do not show, but it is inferred that 33 children are dead in the room. Donald walks out into the alleyway, hand on the other side of the building, throws up in the street, turns toward his sergeant and grabs his shirt collar. "Want you to go to my house. Use the code to my shed key. Grab every shotgun that's in there. Get every car in the station. In front, we're having a meeting." Narrator tells us what's going on. Donald and angry mob walking down a street. People inside businesses and homes briefly look out windows. Close them, close shutters, close doors. The police walking down the street toward Fred Krueger's home. Inside Fred Krueger's house, sitting in front of a TV, picking his teeth with a chicken bone. Or what is assumed is a chicken bone. Door smashes open. Fred turns toward them. 50 police go rushing into the house and grab him, yank him out of his front door, and drag him to the car, him screaming. They open the trunk. Fred sees 4 gas cans. They throw him inside. Donald Thompson at the driver's seat, driving, furrowed brow, angry, vengeful look on his face. Police officers looking forward worriedly as they drive. Nancy sitting in the back seat of Chief Thompson's car, and Marge. They pull up to an old abandoned building, an old boiler room that was closed down years ago. Donald gets out of the car, yells at Marge and Nancy, "You stay in the car." Other police walk up to the back in the trunk, open it up, and Fred lashes out with his fingernails. They all gang rush him, grab him, and lift him up, hands behind his back. They bring him inside the building. Marge tells Nancy to wait in the car, doors locked, walks away from the car. Donald and the rest of the officers bring Fred inside. They handcuff him to the boiler. Fred, lashing out, screams, "This isn't the last you've heard of me." Donald whips out his service revolver, aims it at Fred's chest, and fires off 1 round into his lung. Fred slumps over, moaning. Donald turns towards him, kneels down in front of him and says, "But this is the last you're going to see. Look at me." Grabs Fred by the hair, rips his head upwards. "Look at me, mother F. This is the last thing that you're gonna see. Look at my face. Remember it." Slams his head into the metal behind him, knocking him out. Donald gets up. A dozen police officers spreading gasoline. One officer throws the gas can on the floor, after having expended it. Donald screams out, "Get everybody out of here." Officers slowly rush out of the door. Donald looks at Fred Krueger slumped over into the corner. He raises his head, bleeding, looks him in the eyes, and smiles. Donald looks back, unbelieved. Donald walks towards the exit, but before doing so, takes out a book of matches, turns toward Freddy, and he smiles back. He lights the match, throws it on the floor. Donald leaves, shuts the door. As Donald exits the room, Marge comes running up to him. He says to her, "I told you to wait in the car." She says, "Is it done?" He says, "It's about to be." Marge says, "My God, what have we done?" Focuses back to the boiler room, inside. Fire rushes up the walls, left and right. Fred staring at the fire as it reflects in his eyes. Seemingly alive, the fire travels along the trail of the gasoline, enveloping Fred's legs. He sits there screaming, shaking, trying to put the fire out. Donald, hearing the commotion, grabs Marge and walks her away from the scene. All the officers and them stand staring at the building lit ablaze, as Fred screams on the inside, "None of your kids are safe." Screaming in absolute agony, "None of your kids are safe. This won't be the last you've seen of me." The words die down to just pure agony and screams of terror and pain. Silence, just the sound of a burning building. Nancy, quarter-mile down the road, looking through the forest at the burning building, the fire reflecting in her eyes. Slow zoom in on her face. Cut to intro credits.